Oh, fuck. It's the end of another shitty week. What can I say? We'll do some tales from the pumps. Hey, did you know it's a hate speech to tell somebody to suck my balls? I said it on Facebook. I got blocked because they said that's a hate speech. I was just, telling someone basically nicely to suck my balls. That's all. Anyway, but these people that run ads for fucking donations and stuff like that, it gets ridiculous. But anyway, going back to the gas shortage and the lines. Eventually, it dawned on people that it wasn't us. It was out of our control. So things calmed down a little bit, but you still had your random stupidity, like people parking their cars by the pumps in the middle of the night, and then hopefully they're going to show up by the time we open, which usually they did, and we yell at them. Not too much you could do, but at one point someone had left the car blocking the complete, you're on a street and the pumps are in the middle and you got service on this side, service on that side. So he's blocking all the pumps on this side. It's like 8:15. Motherfucker hasn't shown up yet. We didn't have a tow truck back then. So I came up with an idea that we basically had these big floor jacks, these big pump jacks, not like the ones you buy in Harbor Freight or whatever, but the real big ones. So we dragged that out and put it under the pump into the car and sort of like dragged the car a little bit out of the way near the sidewalk, and then we let nature take its course when a cop car came by, and we said we found it like that. We don't know where the owner is, and it got towed. So that was one way of handling it. The other thing was people that were being assholes, like, you say it's a $5 and $10 minimum on the gas, but when you think of it today, that's a gallon or 2 gallons. Back then, that gas was still 70, 80 cents still going during all this. So it was, whatever. You were still getting, enough gas to get around. So we would put a sign on the last car in line because we didn't want to be there all morning, time it off, and I note what the last car in line was. And sometimes the last car in line, was changed, and we threw him the fuck out of line for switching the signs. And then there was another guy, for some reason, was blowing his horn, and I walked down, I go, "What's your problem?" He goes, "I want gas." I said, "You're going to get the gas. Don't honk the horn." Okay, the minute I turned my back, he wanted to be cute and honk the horn. Well, we blocked his fucking ass, and he's out of line. So, like I said, eventually it tapered off, and, 2 hours a day doing that, and then I was basically learning shit after that. Simple shit, oil changes, draining transmissions. Then I got more into brakes, back then, because the disc brakes were just starting, and you still had 60s cars that basically had shoes all around. And if you know what I'm talking about, if you're an old timer like me, the brake shoes in there. Well, put them in the back, you had, any way you put these on, you had to basically adjust them till the wheel grabbed. And then you'd have to take the car out, and I'd go around the side and drive it down the street and then hit the brakes, and if it pulled that way, you had to lighten up that on this or something. You get what I'm saying. So it took a while. But then they came out with the front wheel disc brake, which were a lot easier to deal with because you just collapse the caliper, and flip it out, take the rotor off. Sometimes you'd cut it, sometimes you didn't. Pack the bearings. We didn't have a bearing packer then. You did it by hand and all this other shit. So, so I was doing that. But then things let up. And basically I was working 1 in the afternoon till 11 at night. And it was mostly pumping gas because that was the deal. In between gas customers, I would, do shit, but it sort of was like coitus interruptus because you're in the middle of doing something and you hear the bell ring and you're out there pumping gas. So, went with the territory, but sometimes I had a rotten attitude. And, as a 20-something-year-old guy, it was easy to cop an attitude. So, you work till 11 o'clock at night, close the place up, but in the interim you meet some weird characters because right across the street, my father had his store, there was a deli, then there was a bar. And it was an old, World War II guys hangout, shot in a beer joint, but younger people were going in there because it was cheap, and you get some weird characters. So the other thing was, too, that I was only making back then maybe $3 an hour on the books. So after you take out, the tax and Social Security, that leaves you with about 2.25 an hour. So even though I was still living at home, I was paying board, and it was like I needed drinking money. So I started peddling bootleg 8-track tapes because my mentor in the flea market business down the road, Terrible Tom, had bootleg 8-track tapes. I think they probably cost me like $1.50 a piece, and I'd sell them $3 a piece, 2 for $5. So like I'd wait till my bosses left, and then pop my trunk, which was, right opposite the pump, so you could see it. Had to sign up, 8-track tapes, whatever, and let people go shopping. I got caught a couple. I'll never do it again. And I always was hustling something on the side. I had to, it was like you had to make some extra money. So like I said, you meet weird characters, and one guy one night pulls in his beat up white Mustang, and he goes, "Oh, you new in town?" And I go, "Yeah, pretty much so." And he goes, "Well, I'm the local pot dealer. You want to see what I got?" And I'm like, "Okay." So he pops his trunk, and he's got a beat up little attaché case in there with, nickel bags, ounces, quarter ounces, whatever. And his name was Sabu. His real name was Charlie Sabatini. He's no longer with us, unfortunately. But he was the local weed dealer, and everybody fucking knew it. Plus, we get into, little wheeling and dealing, because he'd wind up, I don't know if I probably told a comic book story, but, if I didn't, remind me if I didn't tell the comic book story, and I'll tell it again. I don't want to waste time doing shit, but I might have told it on another segment. But anyway, he was cool until he started fucking around with angel dust, and we all know what that does, and he got himself in a shitload of trouble, and unfortunately passed away at like 46 years old, which is pretty fucked up. But hey, a lot of crazy people back then. A lot of even crazier drugs back then too, which I can get into down the road. But yeah, I was doing that, and after a while, I forget what the fuck happened, because it was two partners, Bernie and Steve, and Steve was the real mechanic. Bernie, sort of the front man. So I think they were gonna have to lay me off, and basically, if I got laid off, I remember what it was. Unemployment was only going to give me $50 a week, so I had to figure out something. So they basically hooked me up with this guy who owned a Texaco station up the road, and that's where we used to get our heavy engine work done. His name was Charlie. It was Sunrise Texaco. So they said, you can go work up there. They'll pay you $2 an hour off the books. So this is where I really started learning shit the hard way, and met a real cast of characters where basically, I was pretty much of a drinker back then, just going to the one bar across, like across from where I used to work at the Getty station. But there was another bar further up the block, affectionately known as the Zoo. It was the Lyndhurst Lounge, but it was known as the Zoo because it was insane. And that was where all the bad guys hung out. And little did I know that I was going to get drawn into that web. But that's another story coming down the road for more Tales from the Pumps. So the weekend's coming up. Have a great weekend. Be safe. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for tuning in. And we will catch you on the flip side.